Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I am so glad you are here with us today because we are tackling a subject that I think is, well, the secret engine behind almost every interaction we have.
Absolutely. It's everywhere.
Right. Whether you are sitting in a really high-stakes boardroom or standing on a used car lot or, honestly, just trying to figure out where to go for dinner with your partner when you're both just tired and hungry, you are using the skills we're going to talk about today. We are talking about the transition from simply knowing a language, like knowing the vocabulary, the grammar, the syntax, to actually wielding it as a tool for influence.
It is a massive shift, honestly. It is the difference between being a passenger in a conversation and being the driver. It's the difference between describing the world as it is and actively shaping the world into what you want it to be.
I really love that distinction. And to help us navigate this, we are looking at a really fascinating breakdown from the Advanced Learner Studio. The source material is titled Mastering the Language of Persuasion and Negotiation. Now, on the surface, that might sound like a business English textbook, but once you start reading through this transcript, you realize it is actually a manual on social psychology.
Yeah, and emotional intelligence. The premise here is really cool. It posits that the ultimate test of fluency isn't how many words you know. I mean, you can memorize the dictionary and still be a completely terrible communicator.
So true.
The true test of fluency is how you handle disagreement. Like, how do you navigate conflict? How do you persuade someone who starts off thinking you are entirely wrong?
That is the hook for me. Because let's be honest, agreeing is easy. If I say, well, the sky is blue, and you say, yes, it is, we haven't really done anything, the linguistic load is zero.
Right. Yes is just the path of least resistance. But to disagree, to tell someone they are wrong without making them hate you, to tell your boss that their pet project is going to fail without getting fired, that's the dream.
Exactly. Or to get a vendor to lower their price when they have already said no. That requires a level of nuance and psychological strategy that goes way beyond just knowing the definition of words.
So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack those specific mechanics for you. We aren't just looking at vocabulary words, we are looking at social strategies. We are going to break down the art of diplomatic disagreement, how to play devil's advocate effectively, and why that is actually a good thing, the mechanics of the trade-off, and even some hardball tactics for when being the nice guy just isn't working.
And we are basing this on a linguistic analysis of professional communication. The source material highlights that the goal isn't just to be understood. The goal is influence. It is about moving the needle without breaking the relationship.
Moving the needle without breaking the relationship. I feel like that should be tattooed on the forehead of every manager I have ever had.
It would definitely save a lot of human resources meetings, that is for sure. It really would. So let's set the stage here. The source material makes this great point right at the beginning. It is infinitely harder to disagree or negotiate effectively than it is to just state facts. So let's jump right into part one, which is the art of diplomatic disagreement.
This is the foundation. If you can't navigate a disagreement, you cannot negotiate. And the biggest pitfall here, the thing that trips people up constantly, is the word no.
The dreaded no. It is so efficient, though. 2 letters.
Yeah.
Clear meaning. It's universal. Why is it such a problem in a negotiation context?
It's too efficient. That is the actual problem, is a wall. When you say no to someone, especially in a professional setting or a high-stakes conversation, you aren't just rejecting the idea. You are, in a small, subconscious way, rejecting the person who had the idea. It triggers an immediate defensive response.
It's biological, isn't it? Like our brains perceive rejection as a physical threat.
Exactly. The amygdala just lights up. If I offer you an idea and you just say no, my brain goes into fight or flight mode. I stop listening to your logic and I just start defending my ego.
Okay, so let's paint a picture for you here. Let's say we are colleagues. I come to you all excited, and I say, hey, I think we should launch this new product next week. It's ready to go. Let's just push the button. Now, you know for a fact that this is a disaster waiting to happen. The logistics aren't ready. The marketing isn't done. If you just look at me and say, no, that is a terrible idea, what happens?
Well, you feel attacked. You feel stupid. And your immediate reaction is probably to argue with me. You will say, it is not a terrible idea, you just don't get it.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we are arguing about my tone and your intelligence rather than the actual logistics of the launch.
Yeah.
The conversation becomes a conflict rather than a collaboration.
So we need a way to stop the bad idea without stopping the relationship. The source material suggests a specific strategy called the reservation.
Right. This is a subtle but incredibly powerful shift. Instead of a flat refusal, you say something like, I see where you're coming from, but I have some reservations.
I have some reservations. Let's unpack that word. It feels, I don't know, it feels sophisticated. It feels adult.
It is sophisticated. In the context of language learning, it is considered a C2 level word, which means it represents a very high level of mastery. But psychologically, think about what it actually does. A reservation isn't a blockade. It isn't a dead end. It is a holding back.
Kind of like a pause.
Yes. It implies, I am willing to go on this journey with you. I want to go on this journey with you, but I have specific items that are preventing me from moving forward right now.
It sounds much more specific than just saying, I don't like it.
That is the key. It invites the other person to ask, okay, what are those reservations? Now you are discussing specific problems, the logistics, the budget, the timing, rather than arguing about whether your idea is good or bad. It shifts the entire focus from the person to the details.
That is a crucial distinction. You are validating that the ideal exists and has merit. I see where you're coming from, but you're flagging specific issues. It turns the conflict into a puzzle that we can solve together.
Precisely. You are standing side by side looking at the problem, rather than standing face to face yelling at each other.
I love that visual. And that leads perfectly into the second strategy mentioned in the source, which is the soft no.
The soft no. This is the classic, it's not you, it's me, but for business.
It's not you, it's the key 3 budget projections.
Exactly. The phrase the source highlights is, I am not sure I entirely share your view on that.
Let's listen to that again. I am not sure I entirely share your view. That is incredibly polite. It is almost painfully polite.
It is, but look at the mechanics of it. It starts with I. It owns the hesitation. It doesn't say your view is wrong. It says, I don't share it. It creates a gap between your perspective and my perspective without labeling your perspective as invalid.
And the word entirely is doing a whole lot of heavy lifting there, isn't it? I don't entirely share your view.
Oh, absolutely. It is a hedge. It softens the blow. It suggests that maybe we agree on 80% of things, but there's this 20% where we diverge. It bridges the gap rather than burning the bridge.
It keeps the conversation alive. If I say you are wrong, the conversation is over. If I say I don't entirely share your view, the natural next step is for us to discuss why. It practically invites explanation.
It lowers the temperature in the room. It signals that we are having a discussion, not an argument. Now, there is a third option mentioned in the source, which is a bit more rigid. The phrase is, I beg to differ.
I beg to differ. I feel like I need to be wearing a monocle and a top hat to say that. I beg to differ. My good man.
It definitely has a vintage flavor to it. It can sound a bit academic or even a bit stuffy, depending on how you deliver it.
Is there a time when you would actually use that? Or is it just something we see in period dramas?
No, it still has utility in very formal settings, say a legal negotiation or a very structured board meeting or an academic debate. It signals a firm, polite, but absolute disagreement. It is not a soft no. It is a hard no, wrapped in very polite clothing.
So it is for when you want to stop a line of thinking in its tracks, but you are required by protocol to remain civil.
Exactly. It asserts authority. I beg to differ implies I know something you don't and I'm correcting the record. It is not an invitation to collaborate. It is a statement of position.
So to summarize that, I have reservations, is for when you want to discuss the details, I beg to differ, is for when you want to kill the idea politely.
That is a very good way to look at it. One invites collaboration, the other asserts authority.
Okay, so we've established how to say no without starting a fist fight. But sometimes you aren't even sure if you want to say no. You just want to test the idea. You want to poke holes in it to see if it holds water. This brings us to part 2, depersonalizing conflict. And the force brings up one of my absolute favorite idioms, playing devil's advocate.
This is such a vital tool for critical thinking, but I think a lot of people just misuse it. They use it as an excuse to just be annoying.
Right. I'm just playing devil's advocate, but your shoes are ugly. That's not how it works.
No, that is just being rude. The idiom actually has a really fascinating history. It comes from the canonization process in the Catholic Church.
Really? Like the process of making saints?
Yes. When they were deciding if someone should be a saint, they would appoint a specific person, the advocatus diaboli, or devil's advocate, whose entire job was to argue against the candidate. Their job was to find flaws, to be skeptical, to dig up dirt, not because they hated the candidate, but to ensure that if the person did become a saint, the decision was pure and had withstood the absolute toughest criticism.
I had no idea about the history of that. That makes so much sense. So in a modern context, you aren't actually the devil, obviously. You are taking on a role. You are performing a function for the good of the group.
Exactly. And declaring the role is the magic trick here. If I just start attacking your budget plan out of nowhere, you might get defensive. You might think, why is he being so negative? Does he not trust me? But if I preface it by saying, just to play devil's advocate for a moment,
You change the entire framing.
yes, I'm explicitly stating this is not necessarily my true opinion. I am stepping into a role to test the structural integrity of this argument.
It is like putting on a mask. Don't get mad at me, get mad at the mask.
Yes. It creates a completely safe space for rigorous debate. You can ask really hard questions. What happens if the budget gets cut? What if the client hates the design? What if the market crashes? Without it feeling like a personal attack on your optimism.
It depersonalizes the conflict entirely. You aren't attacking the person, you are attacking the scenario.
And that allows the other person to join you in the problem solving. Instead of defending themselves against you, they are defending the idea against the hypothetical scenario you have presented. You become partners in stress testing the idea.
I use this all the time. It is also a really great way to voice a concern that you actually have, but you don't want to own it fully yet.
Oh, absolutely. It is a very safe way to float a real objection. If the objection gets shot down, you can just say, well, I was just playing devil's advocate. It gives you a clean exit strategy.
Sneaky, but effective. Okay, so we have disagreed, we have poked holes. Now we need to actually get something done. We are moving from conversation to transaction. Part 3, the mechanics of negotiation.
This is where the rubber meets the road. Disagreement is about ideas, but negotiation is about outcomes. It is about movement. And the core concepts here are reaching a compromise and finding common ground.
Common ground. I really like that image. It implies we are standing on different islands and we need to build a bridge to meet in the middle.
And to build that bridge, you usually need materials. In negotiation, those materials are the things you give up. The source talks about the trade-off.
The trade-off, the reality that you rarely get 100% of what you want. You have to give to get.
Right. And there is specific tactical vocabulary for this. The formal term is a concession.
Concession. It sounds heavy. I made a concession. It sounds like a politician losing an election. I have conceded.
It is formal. It comes from the verb to concede, which means to yield or surrender. In a negotiation, a concession is a chip you play. I will concede on the delivery date if you concede on the price. It is very transactional. But then there's this other phrase the source mentions, which is much more colorful and psychological, sweetening the deal.
I love this phrase so much. It changes the psychology completely. A concession feels like a loss. Sweetening the deal feels like a bonus.
Let's use the car dealer example from the source. It is a classic for a reason. You're at the dealership, you're haggling over the price of a car. You want it for $20,000. The dealer wants $22,000. The dealer says, look, I can't lower the price anymore. The boss won't let me. But then he says, but tell you what, I will throw in free insurance and a year of oil changes to sweeten the deal.
What just happened there? Because the primary metric, the price, didn't change. You were still paying the amount you didn't want to pay. But suddenly you feel better about it. Why?
Because I got something free.
Exactly. He sweetened it. He added value without lowering the cost. It triggers that reward center in the brain. Humans are incredibly loss averse. We hate losing money, but we love gaining things. So by adding the oil changes, he shifts your focus from the loss of the money to the gain of the service.
It is the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down.
Ideally, yes. And knowing the difference between a concession, where you actually give up ground, and sweetening the deal, where you add peripheral value, is what separates an average negotiator from a great one. A great negotiator knows exactly what things cost them very little, but have high perceived value to the other person.
So sweetening the deal is often about things that have high perceived value to the buyer, but maybe low cost to the seller?
Often, yes. The oil changes cost the dealership very little. They have the mechanics right there. But to you, that is hundreds of dollars of value. It's a massive psychological win.
But what happens when the sweetening doesn't work? What happens when the other person just sits there, arms crossed, refusing to move an inch? This leads us perfectly into part 4, handling stalemates and stubbornness.
This is the absolute frustration point. The source uses two very evocative idioms here. Won't budge and sticking to their guns.
Sticking to their guns. That is definitely a military metaphor, right?
It is. It evokes a soldier standing their ground, refusing to retreat even under heavy fire. In a business context, it means maintaining a position despite intense opposition. We are sticking to our guns on the price. It implies a moral certainty, or at least a very tactical rigidity.
And won't budge feels very physical, like trying to move a giant, heavy rock.
Exactly. It implies an immovable object. And when you have an immovable object meeting an irresistible force, what do you get?
A giant headache.
Yes, a headache. But technically you get a deadlock or a stalemate.
Let's distinguish those. Stalemate comes from chess, right?
Correct. In chess, a stalemate is a position where no legal move can be made, but the king isn't in check. It is a draw. Nobody wins. In business, a stalemate or deadlock is bad news. It means progress stops entirely. Time is being wasted. Money is being lost.
So if you are in a deadlock, simply sticking to your guns is no longer a viable strategy. It is practically a suicide pact. You need a way out.
You need to break the deadlock. That is the active process of restarting the engine. And the Force suggests a really beautiful metaphor for this offering an olive branch.
The olive branch, that is ancient Noah's Ark, right? The dove brings back the olive branch to show the flood is finally over.
It goes back thousands of years as a symbol of peace. In negotiation, an olive branch is a small gesture, usually a minor concession or just a change in tone, designed to signal, I am willing to talk. I am putting down my weapon.
So if we are just screaming at each other about the price, an olive branch might be, look, let's take a break from the price for a second. Let's agree that we both want this project to succeed.
Exactly. Or, I can't move on the price, but let's look at the delivery schedule together. Maybe I can help you there. It signals a willingness to collaborate again. It invites the other person to step out of their bunker.
And often, breaking the deadlock leads to the solution mentioned in the source meeting halfway.
A literal compromise. You want 10, I want 20, we agree on 15. It is not creative, but it is fair. It resolves the tension.
But, and here is where it gets a little bit spicy, not everyone wants to meet halfway. Sometimes, the other person isn't looking for a fair fight. They are looking to crush you. Or maybe you need to be the one doing the crushing. Let's talk about part 5, hardball tactics.
Yes, the tone completely shifts here. We aren't being diplomatic anymore. We are driving a hard bargain.
Driving a hard bargain, that implies a lot of aggression. It implies that I'm going to squeeze every single ounce of value out of this deal for myself.
It really does.
Yeah.
It means you are negotiating aggressively to get a deal highly favorable to you. And one of the most controversial tactics in this arena is lowballing.
Okay, explain lowballing for everyone. I feel like I see this on those reality real estate shows all the time.
Lowballing is when you offer a price that is deliberately, often offensively, lower than the item's actual value.
So a house is listed for $1 million and I offer $600,000.
Exactly. That is a classic lowball offer.
Why do it? Don't you just insult the seller right out of the gate?
You absolutely do risk insulting them. And that is the specific danger the source highlights. The other person might just walk away. They might refuse to even talk to you. They might be so offended they blacklist you completely.
So why take the risk at all? What is the psychological mechanism that makes this actually work?
It is an anchoring tactic. In psychology, anchoring describes the common human tendency to rely way too heavily on the first piece of information offered, the anchor. When the seller lists the house for $1 million, the anchor is $1 million. All negotiations start from there.
All right, that makes sense.
By throwing out $600,000, even if I know you won't take it, I have attempted to reset the anchor. I have aggressively shifted the middle of the negotiation. Suddenly, $800,000 looks like a great price to you, whereas before, you might have been stuck on the $1 million.
It resets the entire scale. It makes a compromise feel like a victory for the seller, even though they just dropped $200,000.
It does, but it requires a very thick skin. You have to be willing to be disliked, and you have to be fully prepared to lose the deal.
Now, on the flip side of the lowball is the defensive hardball tactic, knowing your limit. The source calls this the bottom line.
This is crucial for your own sanity. The bottom line is the absolute limit beyond which you will not negotiate. My bottom line is $5,000. If I can't get it for that, I walk.
Having a clear bottom line prevents you from getting caught up in the emotion of the deal and overpaying. Right, we have all been there. Auction fever. You want to win so badly you completely forget what you were playing.
Exactly. It is your safety brake. And sometimes you have to communicate that bottom line to the other person as an ultimatum.
Take it or leave it.
The ultimate hardball tactic. Here is my offer. It is non-negotiable. Yes or no?
Let's compare that to the soft no we talked about earlier. I'm not sure I share your view versus take it or leave it. They are on completely opposite ends of the universe.
They really are. One prioritizes the relationship, the other prioritizes the transaction. An ultimatum can be effective, but it usually damages the relationship. You are forcing the other person to submit. You're taking away their agency.
So use with extreme caution.
Extreme caution. If you use an ultimatum, you have to be ready to walk away. If you say, take it or leave it, and they say, leave it, and then you say, wait, come back, you have lost all your power.
You have revealed you were bluffing.
Exactly. And nobody respects a bluffer who gets caught.
Okay, let's pivot away from the aggression and back to something a bit more, well, Jedi. Part 6, psychological savvy. The source brings up a technique that comes from the world of improv comedy, believe it or not. Yes, and.
This is my favorite technique in the entire deep dive. It is the ultimate pivot. It transforms conflict into collaboration instantly.
So usually when we want to correct someone or steer them, we say, yes, but, yes, that is a good idea, but we can't afford it. Yes, I like the design, but it is too blue.
Yeah.
What is actually wrong with yes, but?
The word but is a negator. It effectively erases whatever came before it. When you say, yes, I love you, but, the person immediately braces for bad news. In negotiation, yes, but stops momentum. It creates a block. It says, stop, turn around. You are going the wrong way.
Just puts up a wall.
Yes, and does the exact opposite. It accepts the energy of the previous statement and redirects it smoothly. It flows with the traffic, not against it.
Let's look at the example from the source because it is really clear. The scenario is we need to hire more staff.
Right. Standard management problem. If I am the manager and I have no budget, the instinct is to say, yes, but we have no money. End of conversation, morale drops, the employee feels unheard.
Okay, now try it with yes and.
Yes, and if we look at the budget, we can see exactly how many hours we can afford, which might lead us to hire freelancers instead.
Wow. Do you feel the difference there?
It is profound.
You didn't say no. You said yes. You validated the need. We do need help, but then and carried us to a new reality, the budget reality, and led us to a solution, freelancers.
It feels incredibly collaborative. You aren't fighting against the idea of hiring staff. You are working with the employee to find a way to make it happen within the constraints.
It effectively does the exact same thing as no, we aren't hiring full-time staff, but it feels like a yes.
That is the philosophy of persuasion mentioned in the source. Persuasion isn't about winning a battle. It's about leading the other person to your conclusion so they think it was their idea.
That is the ultimate Jedi mind trick. If I say we can't hire staff, we have to hire freelancers, I am giving an order. If I say yes, and let's look at the budget, oh, look, based on this, maybe freelancers are the way to go, then we discovered the solution together.
Exactly. You protect their agency. People are much more likely to support a plan if they feel they helped create it.
That is incredibly powerful. It requires a lot of quick thinking, though. You have to suppress that deep-seated instinct to say but.
It does. It requires you to listen to what the person is actually asking for, the underlying need, rather than just preparing your objection in your head. It is active listening on steroids.
So we have navigated the reservations, we have sweetened the deal, we avoided deadlock, and we used yes and to get to a solution. Now we are at part 7, closing the deal. How do we actually wrap this up?
You need to finalize it. The source mentions 2 phases here. First, ironing out the details.
Ironing out, like a shirt.
Visual imagery again. You have the main agreement, the shirt is sewn, but it is wrinkly. There are small little issues, delivery times, payment terms, minor clauses. You need to smooth them out so the final product is crisp and ready to go.
Ironing out the details sounds so productive. It implies the hard work is done, we're just tidying up. It is a low-stress phase.
And once the wrinkles are gone, you reach the holy grail signing on the dotted line.
The dotted line, the point of no return.
It signifies commitment. In a legal sense, it is binding. In a psychological sense, it is closure. The negotiation is over, we have a deal, the dopamine hits.
But we have to be realistic here. Sometimes, despite the olive branches and the and the sweeteners, you just can't agree. The gap is too wide, the low ball was too low, the ultimatum was rejected. What happens then?
Then you have the failure state, but it is a polite failure state. You agree to disagree.
Let's agree to disagree. It is such a cliche, but it is so useful.
It is a way to disengage without declaring war. It acknowledges that our positions are irreconcilable, but our relationship doesn't have to be. We are putting this topic in a box, locking the box, and moving on.
It protects the relationship from the conflict. We aren't going to solve this, so let's stop fighting before we say something we really regret.
Exactly. It is a mature acceptance of an impasse. It leaves the door open for next time. Maybe next week, the circumstances change, and we can open the box again. But for now, peace.
This has been such an incredible journey through the landscape of communication. We have gone all the way from the subtle reservations to the aggressive ultimatum.
It really highlights that language is a toolkit. If the only tool you have is a hammer, the word no, everything looks like a nail. You smash relationships, you smash ideas. But if you have wrenches, screwdrivers, sandpaper, If you have reservations, trade-offs, sweeteners, and yes and, you can build something much more complex and durable.
And what strikes me is how much of this is really just about emotional intelligence. The source mentions this briefly, but it is the absolute undercurrent of the whole deep dive. Using soft nose isn't just about grammar, it's about empathy. It is about understanding how your words land on the other person.
Absolutely. The best negotiators aren't the ones who talk the most or use the biggest words. They are the ones who can read the emotional temperature of the room. They know when the other person is feeling insecure and needs a sweetener. They know when the other person is stuck and needs an olive branch. They know when to play devil's advocate to take the heat out of the room.
It is about making the other person feel safe enough to change their mind.
That is a beautiful way to put it. People rarely change their minds when they feel attacked. They dig in. They stick to their guns. To get them to move, you have to lower their defenses. You have to make the idea of changing their mind feel like their victory, not their defeat.
So, here is a provocative thought to leave our listeners with today. We talked about how the ultimate goal of persuasion is to make the other person think it was their idea. We talked about yes, and as a way to guide rather than block.
Right.
If that is true, if the best negotiation is invisible and the best influence feels like collaboration, does that mean the best negotiator is actually the one who speaks the least?
That is a fascinating paradox. The one who listens the most has the most information. And the one who asks the right questions, like the devil's advocate, steers the ship much more than the one barking orders.
Silence is a strategy.
Sometimes the loudest move you can make is saying nothing at all and letting the other person fill the space.
Something to mull over the next time you're trying to convince your friends where to go for dinner. Try listening. Try yes and. See if you can get them to suggest the pizza place you wanted to go to all along.
Just don't lowball them on the tip.
Definitely don't do that.
But do try these strategies. It has been an absolute pleasure unpacking this with you today.
Well, always a pleasure.
See you in the next deep dive.
You know that feeling. It is a very specific, visceral kind of sinking sensation right in your gut.
Oh, absolutely. The slow motion car crash of a conversation.
Yeah. You are sitting in a conference chair that is somehow, I do not know, slightly less comfortable than the one across from you.
Right. Maybe the air conditioning is humming a little too loudly.
Or the fluorescent lights feel like they are basically interrogating you. And you realize with this absolute terrifying clarity that you are losing.
It is painful just to think about.
Exactly. It is that moment where the script in your head completely falls apart. You know, you walked in with a plan.
You had a number in your head.
You had your arguments all lined up. You felt ready. But 20, maybe 30 minutes later, you are nodding along to something you hate.
You are agreeing to a price that just makes your stomach turn.
And you are sitting there wondering, how did I get here? What just happened?
It is a universal experience. I mean, everyone, regardless of their profession, has felt that at some point.
Oh,
It happens at car dealerships. It happens in high-stakes salary reviews. It happens when you are trying to negotiate a lease, or even, let us be honest, when you are trying to decide whose parents to visit for the holidays with a very stubborn partner.
yeah, that might be the highest stakes negotiation of all.
Exactly.
And that feeling, that exact sense of being outmaneuvered, is what we are digging into today.
Yes, we are.
We are looking at the mechanics behind that sinking sensation. But more importantly for you listening, we are going to look at how to stop it from happening. We are doing a deep dive into advanced negotiation strategies and really the psychology of hardball.
It is a fascinating topic because, you know, we tend to think of negotiation as this purely logical exchange of math.
Right. I have 3 apples. I want $3.
Exactly. You offer $2, we settle on $2.50.
Yeah.
Simple, right?
Very simple.
In theory.
But the source material we are analyzing today, which comes from a really dense, incredibly insightful session by the Advanced Learner Studio, hosted by negotiation commentators Emma and John well, they argue that logic is actually secondary. Yeah. They make a very strong case for that.
The real game, the game that actually decides the winner, is emotional.
It is basically psychological warfare with a smile.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
It is about perception, pressure, and managing human behavior under stress.
So here is our mission for this deep dive today. We are going to strip away the polite veneer of, typical business meetings, and we are going to look at the raw tactics.
The structural mechanics of the conversation.
Right. We are going to unpack the specific strategies that Emma and John highlighted, things with these great, slightly intimidating names like BTNA anchoring, stonewalling, and the good cop, bad cop dynamic.
The classic moves.
But I do not just want the definitions today. I want the why.
That is the key. Emma and John give us the toolkit, right?
Yeah.
They give us the specific moves, the vocabulary to identify what is happening.
Mm-hmm.
My job, and what we are going to do together here, is to look at the wiring under the dashboard. Why does silence make us panic?
Right, why do we hate the awkward pause?
Exactly. Why does the first number we hear stick in our brains like superglue? Because once you see the psychological machinery at work, you stop being a cog in it.
You stop reacting and you start maneuvering.
I love that image. We are going to give you, the listener, X-ray vision for your next difficult conversation.
Precisely. That is the goal. So let us start at the very beginning. The source material makes a really bold claim right out of the gate.
It really does.
They basically say that most people lose the negotiation before they even open their mouths, like before they even step into the room.
Yes. They argue that the outcome is often determined before you even walk in, based on one very specific factor.
Leverage.
Right? Leverage. It is a word we throw around a lot in business and in sports, but in this context, it has a very specific, very ruthless meaning.
It is not just about having a better product or being smarter than the other guy.
No. It is about need.
If I need this deal, I have no leverage. Is that the gist of it?
That is exactly the gist. If you walk into a room and you have absolutely zero other options.
Like if this job interview is the only one you have had in 6 months.
Right. Or if this supplier is the only one who has the part you need to keep your entire factory running today, you are not really negotiating.
You are begging.
You are. You might be begging very politely. You might be wearing a nice suit and using big corporate words. But psychologically, you are in a position of suppliance.
You are totally at their mercy.
Yes. And this brings us to the first big acronym of the day.
Oh, I love this one. Honestly, it sounds like something out of a military operation or maybe a gadget from a superhero's utility belt.
It does have a very tactical ring to it.
BATNA. BATNA. Break this down for us. What does BATNA actually stand for?
It stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement.
Okay, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. That is a massive mouthful of corporate speak right there.
It is very academic.
But the source material boils this down to plain English as essentially being your plan B.
Yes, but I feel like calling it a plan B almost undersells the power of it.
I agree. Plan B sounds like something you scribble on a napkin when things go horribly wrong at the last minute.
It absolutely undersells it.
Yeah.
A plan B sounds like a backup you are praying you do not have to actually use. A BATNA is your safety net. It is the solid ground you are standing on.
It changes your posture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. The BATNA is the concrete, factual answer to the question, what happens to me if I walk away from this table right now?
And if the answer is, well, I go bankrupt or I lose my house or I have to move back in with my parents, then your BATNA is terrible.
It is non-existent. And your anxiety will be visible to everyone in the room. This is the crucial psychological insight from Emma and John.
That humans are incredibly good at detecting desperation.
Yes, it is a survival instinct. We can smell fear. If you are desperate, you will emit these microsignals. Your voice will be a little bit higher. You will talk a little too fast.
You will fill silences that you definitely shouldn't fill.
You will agree way too quickly to terms that are bad for you. The other side will smell it, and they will eat you alive.
Let us look at the example the source material uses, the job interview. Because I think literally everyone listening has been there at some point.
Oh, definitely.
You are currently unemployed, the bills are piling up, the rent is due in exactly 1 week. You are sitting in that interview chair. How does a weak BTNA play out in that scenario?
Well, because your alternative is zero. Your alternative is continued unemployment and actual financial ruin. You are terrified of the word no.
Right.
That fear makes you completely risk-averse. When they ask about salary expectations, you will likely lowball yourself.
Because you would rather get the job at a low rate than risk offending them and getting absolutely nothing.
Exactly. When they mention long hours or mandatory weekend work, you will nod with enthusiastic agreement even if you secretly hate the idea. You become highly pliable.
You are essentially handing them the keys to your life because you feel like you have no choice.
You are. Now, flip this group completely. Let us look at the scenario where you have a strong BATNA.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let us say you already have a job you actually like. It pays well. You like your boss. The coffee in the break room is decent.
The dream.
Right. But a headhunter calls you out of the blue and says, hey, just come talk to us. We think you'd be a great fit for this new role.
Oh, the vibe is totally different.
Completely different.
I am walking into that room, leaning back in my chair. I am maybe 5 minutes late, not on purpose, but just because I am not stressing out about the bus schedule. I am looking at the art on the walls.
You are cracking jokes with the receptionist. You're asking them hard questions.
Yeah, I am saying, why should I work here? What is your corporate culture actually like? Why is this position open? Did the last guy quit because it's terrible here?
Because if it doesn't work out, what happens? You just go back to your nice job and drink your decent coffee.
Nothing changes for me. I am safe.
That is the power of BATNA. It changes your entire physiological state. You are not in fight or flight mode anymore. You are in exploration mode.
And here is the paradox that the source material really highlights, which I think is brilliant. The person who cares less about the outcome actually controls the negotiation.
It is so true.
That is kind of hard to hear, though, because we're always taught to care. We are taught to be passionate, to show we really want the opportunity.
Passion is good for doing the actual work.
Right.
Passion is terrible for negotiating the contract.
Wow, that is a great way to put it.
In negotiation, apathy, or at least the genuine ability to be apathetic, is a superpower.
Because you can walk away?
If you are genuinely willing to say, thanks, but this doesn't work for me, and stand up and walk out the door, the power dynamic shifts instantly.
You are not chasing them anymore. They have to decide if they want to chase you.
It is the ultimate power move, according to Emma and John. The willingness to walk away.
Yes. It is the ultimate leverage. But let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because I know people listening are thinking this.
Go for it.
Isn't this just a bluff? Can I not just pretend I have a great BTNA? Can I just swagger in there and act like I do not care, even if I am secretly desperate?
You can try. And some people are sociopathically good actors.
True.
But the source material explicitly warns that this is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
If you are bluffing about your leverage and they call you on it, you crumble.
Because there is nothing underneath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Real leverage gives you a quiet confidence that is very, very hard to fake. It is not about swagger. It is about safety.
When you know you are safe, you just negotiate differently.
You listen better. You think clearer. You do not react to provocations.
So step one is not memorizing clever lines or practicing power poses in the mirror. It is doing the actual homework to ensure you actually have somewhere else to go.
Exactly. You build your power before you enter the room. You find that second job offer. You line up that second supplier. You create your safety net in the real world.
Okay, so let us assume we have done that.
We have our BTNA.
We have our BTNA, we are feeling secure, we walk into the room or, we log onto the Zoom call, as is much more likely these days. Now the actual talking begins.
The fun part.
And this brings us to one of the most contentious parts of negotiation, according to the source. The first number.
Ah, yes. The anchor.
The source material spends a lot of time on anchoring. And I have to say, this part blew my mind a little bit because it goes against so much conventional wisdom.
It really does.
I feel like I have always been told never show your cards first. Let them speak first so you know what they're thinking. The whole he who speaks first loses mantra.
That is the traditional wisdom. It feels safe, right? You want to gather information before committing.
Right. But the source is saying, no, drop the anchor yourself.
It is a huge debate in business schools, but Emma and John lean heavily on the cognitive psychology side of this, which says the first number spoken aloud literally changes the reality of the room.
Let us unpack the psychology here. What is an anchor actually doing to our brains? Why are we so incredibly susceptible to it?
Anchoring is a cognitive bias. It describes the human tendency to rely too heavily, to anchor on the first piece of information offered when making decisions.
Even if we know the number is somewhat arbitrary?
Even if we know it is completely arbitrary. It sets a baseline. It becomes the center of gravity for the entire subsequent discussion.
The source gives a real estate example to illustrate this. Let us walk through that because I think it makes it very concrete for you listeners.
Sure. Imagine a house. The seller lists it for $1 million.
Okay. $1 million. That is the anchor.
That is the anchor. Now, you might look at the neighborhood comps, look at the condition of the roof, the old plumbing, and objectively calculate that the house is really only worth $800,000.
Okay, so the real value, based on actual data, is $800,000.
Correct. But the sign says $1 million.
Right.
So you go in and you negotiate hard. You sweat, you argue, you point out the cracks in the driveway, the dated kitchen, and you manage to talk them down to $900,000.
Which feels like a massive victory.
You walk away feeling like a genius. You high-five your spouse. You say, I just saved us $100,000. I beat them. I am a master negotiator.
But wait, let us do the math here. If the house was actually worth $800,000, I just paid $900,000.
Exactly. You overpaid by $100,000.
Wow.
But you feel like you won because your brain was measuring your success relative to the anchor, the $1 million, rather than the objective value of the house.
The seller totally controlled the zone of possible agreement just by setting the ceiling high right at the start.
They defined the entire scale of the conversation. Everything was a negotiation down from $1 million rather than up from $800,000.
That is actually terrifying. It is exactly like the sale rack at a clothing store.
Oh, retail relies on this entirely.
You see a jacket that says original price, $500, now $250.
And you buy it because it is a steal?
Right. But if you just walked into the store and saw a jacket sitting there for $250 without the crossed out bigger number, you might think, wow, that is expensive for a nylon jacket.
Precisely. The sale is an illusion created by the anchor. We judge value relatively, not absolutely.
So the strategy here is to actively use this bias in your favor. If you are selling, you start high.
Yes.
And if you are buying, you start low.
Exactly. By speaking first, you set the parameters of reality for that meeting. If you are selling a car and you say, I want $10,000, the entire conversation is now about why it should be slightly lower than $10,000.
Right.
But if you let the buyer speak first and they say, I will give you $5,000, now you are fighting a massive uphill battle to drag them up from that tiny number.
You are reacting to their reality instead of creating your own.
Yes. However, and there's a however, in the source material here.
I was going to say there has to be a limit to this.
There is. You cannot just throw out any random crazy number. Emma and John explicitly warn against making an offer that is laughable.
Because that would just backfire.
Completely.
Oh, thanks.
This is where emotional intelligence comes back into play.
Yeah.
If you anchor so high or so low that it is absurd, you do not just set a benchmark. You insult the other party.
Right. If I try to sell you my beat-up used Honda Civic for $100,000, you are not going to counteroffer $50,000.
No.
You are just going to leave. You're going to assume I am crazy and walk away.
Or worse, you are going to get angry. An absurd anchor signals one of two things to the other person. Either you are totally delusional and do not know the market.
Which makes you a bad business partner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or it signals that you think I am stupid enough to fall for it.
Which is insulting.
It breaks the fundamental social contract of the negotiation. It risks derailing the entire thing immediately because you have proven yourself to be an unserious actor.
So it is really a tightrope walk. You want to be aggressive enough to skew the psychology in your favor, but grounded enough that you do not look like a clown.
The term professional negotiators use is defensible. Your anchor must be aggressive, but defensible.
What does that look like in practice?
You need to be able to say, I am asking $10,000 because of the low mileage, the brand new tires, and the custom sound system.
You have to have a rationale.
Even if it is a bit of a stretch, there has to be a logic to it. You have to give them a reason to take the number seriously, even if they completely disagree with it.
Okay, so we have established our leverage with our BATNA. We have tried to set the playing field by anchoring defensively. But now we get into the messy part.
The middle game.
Yes, the middle of the negotiation. This is where things can get really ugly.
The playing dirty section of the source material.
Exactly. The source material transitions here into what I like to call defense against the dark arts.
A very apt title.
Because let us be honest, not everyone negotiates in good faith. Some people are out to actively manipulate you. They are not looking for a fair deal. They are looking to crush you.
And if you do not recognize the manipulation for what it is, you will react emotionally.
And as we have established, once you react emotionally, once you get angry or scared, you lose.
You stop thinking clearly. The logic centers of your brain shut down.
The first dirty tactic they mention is an absolute Hollywood classic. I feel like I have seen this in every police procedural show since the 1970s.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yes, good cop, bad cop. It is a cliche, but it is a cliche for a reason.
It works. It relies on very basic, deeply ingrained human needs for safety and validation.
But how does this actually look in a modern business setting? I assume it is not one guy yelling and hitting the conference table with a phone book while the other offers me a cigarette and a glass of water.
Usually not quite that dramatic, no.
Dear goodness.
In a professional setting, it is much more subtle. And honestly, it is more insidious because of that subtlety. It creeps up on you without you realizing it.
Paint the picture for us. How does this actually go down in a boardroom?
Okay, imagine you are negotiating a software contract with a vendor. You are in a nice conference room. Across from you are two people from their team. Let us call them Sarah and Mike.
Okay. Sarah and Mike.
Mike is the bad cop.
Got it.
He is rigid. He is looking at his phone while you talk, maybe rolling his eyes a little. He shoots down every single proposal you make.
Just a wall of negativity.
He says things like, "That is ridiculous," or "We cannot possibly do that," or "Is that really the best you could do?"
He is aggressively unhelpful.
He creates tension in the room. He actively raises your cortisol levels. You feel attacked and fundamentally unsafe.
Okay, I am stressing out just imagining Mike. I hate Mike already.
Exactly. You are supposed to hate Mike. Then there is Sarah, the good cop.
Here comes the savior.
She looks embarrassed by Mike's behavior. She leans in toward you. She speaks softly. She makes more eye contact.
She is humanizing the interaction.
She says, "Look, I am so sorry about this. I really want to make this work with you. I think your product is genuinely great. But Mike, he has strict orders from the finance department. He is tough to deal with."
And you immediately want to hug Sarah. You think, finally, an ally, someone who actually understands me.
That is the trap. That exact feeling of relief. That is a chemical reaction.
Really?
Yes. It is dopamine and oxytocin flushing your system after the intense stress of dealing with the bad cop. The manipulation is specifically designed to make you bond with the good cop against the bad cop.
It weaponizes your empathy and your natural human desire for connection.
Exactly. So then Sarah says, "If you can just lower the price by 5%, I think I can get Mike to agree. Help you. Give me something I can take to him."
And you do it?
You give the concession.
Yeah.
Not because it makes any business sense, but because you want to reward Sarah and you want to avoid dealing with Mike ever again.
You are paying for emotional relief, not for business value. Wow. When you break it down step by step like that, it is really dark. You are not negotiating the deal anymore at all. You are managing a manufactured relationship.
You are being played by a performance. It is theater.
So what is the countermeasure here? If I'm sitting there and I suddenly realize, wait a minute, Sarah is playing me, what do I do? Do I call them out on it?
The source says the absolute key is to detach. Do not react emotionally. You have to look at the situation from above and label it.
Label it? What do you mean?
Say to yourself internally, this is a performance. Mike is playing a role.
Yeah.
Sarah is playing a role.
Label the performance. I really like that. It takes all the teeth out of it.
Once you see it as a script they are just reading from, the fear goes away. You realize Sarah is not your friend.
She is just the other half of the strategy.
Exactly. You do not need to save her from Mike. You just need to stick to your BATNA and stick to your numbers.
So you just ignore the dynamic.
You can even call it out gently if you're feeling confident. You can say, "I appreciate you trying to bridge the gap, Sarah, but the math does not change, regardless of who I am speaking to."
Oh, that is a power move in itself. Just staying cool, not getting rattled by Mike, not getting charmed by Sarah.
It takes practice, but it is the only way to win against that tactic.
Okay, the second dirty tactic Emma and John mentioned is arguably even more frustrating than being yelled at by a bad cop.
Oh, yes. Stonewalling.
Stonewalling. The tactic of refusal. The strategic use of absolutely nothing.
This is essentially the silent treatment, right?
It is the silent treatment, but weaponized for business. It is refusing to answer, refusing to budge, refusing to even acknowledge the question you ask.
It involves delaying, giving vague, non-committal answers, or just completely ghosting you.
I feel my blood pressure rising just hearing you describe it.
It is infuriating.
It is that feeling when you send a carefully crafted email saying, "We need a decision by Friday," and you get nothing. Crickets.
Or you ask them directly on a call, "Can you do this price?" And they start talking about the weather or company policy without actually ever saying yes or no.
The goal of stonewalling is to exhaust you. Right.
It is an endurance test. They are banking on the fact that you have a deadline, or that you are deeply uncomfortable with conflict, or that you just wanted to get the deal over with.
They want to create anxiety.
They want you to bid against yourself.
Explain that. Bidding against yourself.
This is the anxiety loop the source material talks about.
Okay.
You send an offer. They do not reply. You wait 2 days.
Yeah.
You start thinking, "Oh no, I offended them. The deal is dead. My boss is going to kill me."
The panic sets in.
So you send a follow-up email. "Hey, just checking in. Actually looking at the numbers again. Maybe we can knock another 2% off."
Oh my goodness. You just negotiated down and they did not even have to speak. You literally did their job for them.
That is the evil genius of stonewalling. They let your own insecurity do the heavy lifting for them.
We are social creatures. We crave reciprocity.
Yes. When we speak, we expect a response. When someone denies us that response, it creates this intense cognitive dissonance that we try to resolve by caving in.
We fill the silence with concessions.
Exactly.
So how do we handle this? If someone is stonewalling me, do I just keep emailing? Do I beg for an answer?
No, that just signals desperation.
Which ruins your leverage.
Exactly. The source material suggests you have to stop the game. You have to break the loop.
Oh.
Sometimes that just means waiting them out, showing that you're perfectly comfortable with the silence.
Let them sweat a little.
Right. But if the clock is ticking and you cannot wait, the source brings up a high-risk maneuver.
They call it calling the bluff.
Another great idiom.
It comes from poker, obviously.
Right. In poker, a player bets heavily as if they have a winning hand, even though they actually have nothing. That is the bluff.
And calling the bluff means you match their bet and force them to physically show their cards, put up or shut up.
Exactly. In a negotiation, this translates to challenging the threat or challenging the silence head on.
So if they say, we're going to walk away if you do not lower the price, calling the bluff is saying, okay, we understand. If that is your final decision, then I guess we cannot do business. Best of luck.
It is, as Emma and John note, high risk, high reward.
Why is it so risky? I mean, it sounds strong.
Because they might not be bluffing.
Oh, right.
Maybe they really will walk away. Maybe they genuinely do not care. Maybe they actually have a much better BAT&A than you do.
And if you call their bluff and you are wrong,
The deal explodes. You have killed it. You have to be prepared for that reality before you say the words.
but if you are right,
If you are right, if they actually do need the deal, if they were just posturing to squeeze a few more dollars out of you, the power dynamic flips instantly.
you have exposed the truth of the situation.
They have to backpedal. They will say, whoa, wait, let us not be hasty. Maybe we can work something out here.
And suddenly you are in the driver's seat.
You have proven you are not afraid. You have proven you have a strong BAT&A.
It sounds like this requires a really good read on the situation. You cannot just throw this tactic around casually.
No. You need to know your own BTNA incredibly well to take that risk. If you are desperate, you cannot call a bluff.
Because you cannot afford to lose the hand.
This brings us right back to leverage. You can only play hardball if you have a shield.
This conversation has been pretty adversarial so far.
Very.
We have been talking about traps and manipulations and psychological warfare. It sounds like a battlefield. It sounds exhausting, frankly.
It often is. Negotiation is frequently viewed in corporate culture as combat.
But the source material shifts gears entirely in the second half, and I found this really refreshing.
Me too.
They introduce a completely different philosophy of the deal. They move from beating the other guy to, well, something better, something much more constructive.
They introduce the core distinction between a zero-sum game and expanding the pie.
Let us define zero-sum first, because this is the default mode for a lot of people, isn't it?
It is. It is the intuitive way our brains view a dispute. A zero-sum game is based on the idea of a strictly fixed amount of resources.
Okay.
Imagine a pizza, a generic medium pepperoni pizza sitting on the table between us.
Okay, well, now I am hungry.
Stay with me here. If there are 8 slices, and I take 5 slices for myself, that means there are physically fewer slices for you. You only get 3.
Right. For you to win, I must lose. Your gain is directly my pain.
It is a strictly competitive environment.
This is the mindset of, if I pay you $5,000 more in salary, that is $5,000 less profit for the company at the end of the year. It is pure math. It is me versus you.
Right. And in a zero-sum negotiation, the aggressive tactics we just discussed, the hardball, the stonewalling, the good cop, bad cop routines, those are the primary tools.
Because you are basically fighting over scraps.
You are wrestling for the biggest piece of a finite pie. You have to be aggressive because resources are inherently scarce.
But highly skilled negotiators, the real masters, according to Emma and John, actively reject this premise. They reject the idea that the pizza is fixed in size.
They do. They look for ways to expand the pie.
I love this concept. Instead of fighting over the slices of the existing pizza, let us just figure out how to bake a bigger pizza.
Or let us add some side dishes.
Exactly. The goal shifts from victory to a win-win situation.
And this requires a totally different skill set. It requires collaboration.
It requires seeing the other person not as an enemy to be defeated across the table, but as a partner in solving a mutual puzzle.
It switches the psychological seating arrangement from face-to-face combat to sitting side by side looking at the problem together.
The source gives a really concrete example of this involving employment terms. I thought this was brilliant in its simplicity. Let us detail that for the listener.
Yes, let us look at that. The scenario is an employee asking for a raise. They say, I want $10,000 more a year. The employer has a hard constraint. They say, I literally cannot pay you more money. The budget is locked. The answer is no.
In a zero-sum game, the negotiation just ends there. Deadlock. One side loses. Either the employee leaves the company or they stay and are incredibly unhappy and resentful.
But if you are trying to expand the pie, you stop looking at just the money. You look for different currencies of value.
Currencies of value. I like that phrase.
You ask, okay, you cannot give me cash. But what else do you have that I want? What else is on the table that we haven't discussed?
So the employer might say, well, I cannot give you cash, but what if we offer you flexible work hours?
Right.
What if you can work from home on Fridays? What if we give you an extra week of paid vacation?
Now think about the economics of that. For the employee, avoiding the commute, having better work-life balance, seeing their kids more, that has real, tangible value.
Maybe that is actually worth more to them personally than the $10,000 after taxes.
Exactly. But for the company, it costs $0.
It does not hit the budget line at all.
That is the magic. You have created value out of thin air. You have expanded the pie.
A company gives something that is cheap for them, but expensive or valuable to the employee.
And the employee might trade something in return, like a willingness to travel more or signing a longer non-compete contract. Things which are cheap for them to give, but very valuable to the company's stability.
By trading on things other than just the headline price, like timing, warranty, publicity, flexibility, job titles, you can build a deal where both sides genuinely feel like they won.
You both walk away with more overall value than you started with.
It seems so obvious when we say it out loud, but it actually requires a lot more cognitive effort than just pounding the table and demanding numbers.
It takes work.
It requires creativity.
And empathy.
That is the biggest thing.
You have to actually understand what the other person cares about.
Right.
If you just assume they only care about money, you miss all these hidden opportunities. You have to ask questions.
Like what?
Like, why is the budget fixed? What are your biggest headaches right now in your department? How can I help you solve those headaches in exchange for what I want?
You have to be deeply curious about their problems.
Exactly. Curiosity is the antidote to the zero-sum mindset.
So we have navigated the hardball tactics. We have maybe even expanded the pie successfully. Now we have to actually land the plane. The source material spend some time on the specific terminology of how these things end.
The terminology of outcomes.
Right. If it goes well, we seal the deal. Or we finalize the agreement.
There is a real psychological weight to those specific phrases. Sealing the deal implies a permanent binding closure.
It is the handshake moment.
It is the relief of tension. It is the exact moment the cortisol drops and the dopamine hits your system.
It is that great we did it feeling.
But sadly, not every negotiation gets a handshake. Sometimes, despite our best BDNAs and our best pie-expanding efforts, the deal falls through.
And the phrase they use for the consequence of that is very evocative. We are back to square one. Or back to the drawing board.
Back to square one. It sounds exhausting just saying it out loud.
It is meant to be. And that brings us full circle to why we do all this preparation in the first place. The reason you develop a strong BATNA, the reason you study anchoring, the reason you look for win-win scenarios
is specifically to avoid the massive cost of going back to the drawing board.
Because starting over is incredibly expensive.
It takes time, it takes energy, it eats up resources, and it can be hugely demoralizing for a team.
Exactly. A failed negotiation is not just a neutral event. It is a total loss of the resources you invested in the process. It is the sunk cost that really hurts.
So playing the game well is not just about winning the immediate trophy. It is about efficiency.
It is about not wasting your life in endless meetings that ultimately go nowhere.
And it is about preserving long-term relationships. If you play way too much hardball, you might win the deal today, but lose the partner for tomorrow.
If the deal falls through because you were too aggressive, you have burned a bridge you might need later. So let us zoom out for a minute here. We have covered a massive amount of ground today for you listening.
We really have.
We started with the absolute prerequisite of leverage, having that plan B, that BATNA, so you are not radiating desperation.
We talked about the brain games of anchoring, how that first number acts like a magnet for our expectations, and why you should be brave enough to set it yourself.
Defensively, of course.
Defensively, yes.
And we discussed the defense mechanisms against the dark arts, spotting the good cop, bad cop routine, enduring the agonizing silence of stonewalling without bidding against yourself.
And at the high-wire act of calling a bluff when necessary.
And finally, we looked at the philosophy of the deal, moving from a hostile zero-sum fight to a win-win collaboration where we try to expand the pie using creativity and empathy.
It is a very comprehensive toolkit that Emma and John provided.
It is, but I think the most important insight from the source material is kind of buried in the subtext of everything we just talked about.
Which is?
That negotiation is not strictly about math or logic. It is deeply, messily emotional.
It is. The source explicitly mentions that keeping your cool is the ultimate baseline skill.
You can know all the tactics in the world. You can have a PhD in game theory. But if you get angry when they lowball you,
You lose. Your brain shuts down the logic centers and activates the fight centers. You start making terrible, impulsive decisions.
if you get scared when they stonewall you,
You lose. You give away the farm, just to end the discomfort of the silence.
managing your own psychology is the absolute prerequisite for managing the negotiation. It is that famous idea, right? He who loses his temper loses the argument.
Precisely. The person who stays calm can see the whole board. The person who panics only sees the immediate threat.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a bit of a challenge today based on this deep dive. The source material hints that the next logical step after mastering these tactics is emotional intelligence and empathy.
The advanced class.
Right, so here is a provocative thought for you to mull over. In your next difficult conversation, whether it is with your boss about a raise, your spouse about weekend plans, or a customer service rep about a broken appliance, what is your actual goal?
Are you just trying to beat them? Are you playing a zero-sum game where you need to crush them to feel like a winner?
Or are you brave enough to try to expand the pie?
It takes significantly more courage to collaborate than it does to just fight.
It requires trusting the process and using your empathy to find a solution that genuinely works for both of you.
That is the real advanced strategy, not just winning the point, but winning the relationship.
Because guess what? You might have to negotiate with this exact same person again next year.
If you crush them today, they will be waiting for you with a grudge.
But if you expanded the pie today, they will actually be happy to see you.
That is a crucial distinction. Relationship capital is real capital in business and in life.
Extremely well said. Listeners, the ball is in your court now. Go out there, check your BATNA, watch out for those absurd anchors, and see if you can seal the deal without losing your soul in the process. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Until next time.